far as I can see, every seat is filled, except a few right there in the back. There's room for improvement.
I can remember the excitement in 1960 when the age for young men serving was reduced from 20 years of age to 19. I arrived in the British mission as a newly called 20-year-old. The first 19-year-old in our mission was Elder Jeffrey R. Holland, an incredible addition.
While watering trees in his yard, this man of faith prayed to God for guidance. As he prayed, he heard a voice in his mind saying, "Stop the boys on the bikes." Jerry, a little bewildered, wondered what this meant. As he reflected on this impression, he gazed up the street and saw two young men in white shirts and ties riding bicycles toward his home. Stunned by this coincidence, he watched them ride by. Then, realizing the situation required him to act, he shouted out, "Hey, you, please stop. I need to talk to you." With a puzzled but excited look, the young men stopped. As they approached, Jerry noticed that they wore name tags identifying them as missionaries in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Jerry looked at them and said, "This may sound a little weird, but I was praying and was told to stop the boys on the bikes. I looked up the street, and here you are. Can you help me?" The missionary smiled and said, "Yes, I'm sure we can help you."
My dear brothers and sisters, my dear friends, we are all mortal. I hope this does not come as a surprise to any of us. My wife Harriet and I love riding our bicycles. It is wonderful to get out and enjoy the beauties of nature. We have certain routes we like to bike, but we don't pay too much attention to how far we go or how fast we travel in comparison with other riders. However, occasionally, I think we should be a bit more competitive. I even think we could get a better time or ride at a higher speed if only we pushed ourselves a little more. And then sometimes I even make the big mistake of mentioning this idea to my wonderful wife. Now, her typical reaction to my suggestions of this nature is always very kind, very clear, and very direct. She smiles and says, "Dieter, it's not a race, it's a journey. Enjoy the moment." How right she is.
Elder Perry, I think you must be the youngest 90-year-old in the whole church. You noticed how he jumped out of his chair.
Brethren, much has been said and written in recent years about the challenges of men and boys. A sampling of book titles, for example, includes "Why There Are No Good Men Left," "The Demise of Guys," "The End of Men," "Why Boys Fail," and "Manning Up." Interestingly, most of these seem to have been written by women.
Earlier this year, I had the privilege to fly in a sophisticated F-18 fighter jet with the world-famous Blue Angels, the United States Navy flight demonstration team. It was like taking a flight above and along memory lane, because exactly 50 years before, almost to the day, I had completed my training as an Air Force fighter pilot. The F-18 flight experience, of course, was totally different from the one in the Piper Cup. It showed me a more dynamic beauty of flying. It was like applying the existing laws of aerodynamics in a more perfect way. However, flying with the Blue Angels also quickly reminded me that being a jet fighter pilot is a young man's game. To quote the Wright brothers again, more than anything else, the sensation of flying is one of perfect peace, mingled with an excitement that strains every nerve to the utmost. In addition, flying with Blue Angels suggested a totally different way of having angels round about you and bearing you up. I feel a certain sadness for those who do not grasp and appreciate the wonder and privilege of the priesthood. They're like passengers on an airplane who spend their time grumbling about the size of the packet of peanuts while they are soaring through the air, far above the clouds.
During the 1940s and 1950s, an American prison warden, Clinton Duffy, was well known for his efforts to rehabilitate the men in his prison. Said one critic, "Don't you know that lepers can't change their spots?" Replied Warden Duffy, "You should know that I don't work with leopards. I work with men, and men change every day." I looked carefully at the men who were seated on the first 3 rows. My attention seemed to be focused on one of the brethren. I said to the mission president, "Could he serve as the branch president?" He replied, "I don't know. Perhaps he could." I said, "President, I'll take him into the other room and interview him. You speak after the closing song and keep singing other songs until we return."
Worldly motivations began to present themselves to me. One was an attractive job offer, extended just as I was finishing my 5th year as president of Ricks College. I considered the offer, prayed about it, and even discussed it with the First Presidency. They responded with warmth and a little humor, but certainly not with any direction. President Spencer W. Kimball listened to me describe the offer I had received from a large corporation and said, "Well, Hal, that sounds like a wonderful opportunity. And if we ever needed you, we'd know where to find you."
Whatever his feelings, Peter said for the 3rd time, "Lord, thou knowest that I love thee." To which Jesus responded, and here again I acknowledge my non-scriptural elaboration. Jesus responded, perhaps saying something like, "Then Peter, why are you here? Why are we back on this same shore by these same nets, having this same conversation? Wasn't it obvious then, and isn't it obvious now, that if I want fish, I can get fish? What I need, Peter, are disciples."
The video segments provided the framework on which the entire production depended. And the Jumbotron was not working. Technicians worked frantically to solve the problem, while the youth waited, hundreds of them, losing precious rehearsal time. The situation began to look impossible. The writer and director of the celebration, Susan Cooper, later explained, "As we moved from plan A to B to Z, we knew that it wasn't working. As we were looking at the schedule, we knew that it was going to be beyond us. But we knew that we had one of the greatest strengths on the floor below, 3,000 youth. We needed to go down and tell them what was happening and draw upon their faith. Just an hour before the audience would begin to enter the center, 3,000 youth knelt on the floor and prayed together.
They prayed that those working on the Jumbotron would be inspired to know what to do to repair it. They asked their Heavenly Father to make up for what they themselves could not do because of the shortage of time. Said one who wrote about it afterward, it was a prayer the youth will never forget. Not because the floor was hard, but because the Spirit melted their bones, close quote. It was not long before one of the technicians came to tell them that the problem had been discovered and corrected. He attributed the solution to luck. But all those youth knew better.